What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the AMS podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Michael Soto, discussing things about films, past, present, and future. This looks like it's an in-person interview today. Before I introduce my friend here, just please make sure to like, subscribe, comment on today's episode, discuss what we'll talk about in just a moment, and thank you all for tuning in. Before I introduce them, technology is not my best friend at times. That's what led to this in-person meeting, and certainly not least, here's my good friend Kevin Rios. Kevin, what's up, man?
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on, brother. Hey, look, technology sucks. It's all right, though. We got this thing on the road right now. We're good here. We're good live.
Yeah, oh man. Just before we start this, like I said, we had some computer issues. We scheduled this a few days earlier at the time of this recording, and it was just a pain in the butt. But lo and behold, it's here. We're in person.
It's fine, man. That's all that matters. That's all that matters.
So,
let's get it done.
Kevin, what do you want to talk about?
Man, I feel like you have a slight idea of what I want to talk about. We've had this conversation before previously. You've heard me ramble on and on, but I feel like it's time to say it out loud to everybody. I feel like right now in Hollywood we're going through a little bit of a decline in quality. I think you can say that throughout all time in Hollywood, no matter what it's been. There's always been bad movies. There's always been a little bit of everything's subjective, but there's always been some bad movies, a bit of a run. But I don't know, man. I think recently, even when it comes down to a certain universe, these have been getting kind of iffy, kind of more quantity over quality than anything. If you haven't guessed it, I'm going to complain about the whole Marvel universe going down right now.
Let's do it.
Look, man, look. This is just one person's opinion. I mean, a lot of people can agree, a lot of people can't. But I really think that right now, ever since the Infinity Saga ended, ever since Phase 4 started, it just hasn't hit the same. The quality of these movies and even the shows now, because Phase 4 started with a lot of these shows and the whole thing about shows being as canon to the movies. It just hasn't really been my cup of tea per se. There's been a good amount of shows that have hit the mark. Like I've loved WandaVision, I've loved Loki. Moon Knight was pretty good as well. But then, you have some other stuff that's come out, like Thor: Love and Thunder, you have Ant-Man: Quantumania, you have She-Hulk, you got, some of them that didn't really hit the mark, right? I think it's a little sad because, we've grown up with this universe the last 10 years since, when Robert Downey first started Iron Man, we ended with him, eventually biting the bullet, right? But, I don't know. I think for me, it's been a little frustrating. Just because, we've seen the height that, Kevin Feige and Marvel have been at with, like, this universe. And to see just, like, nonstop over and over and over and over again coming back down. I saw this video and it explained it really well. Recently, watching a Marvel movie, watching a Marvel show has been kind of like doing homework, right? Like, you're doing it because you have to. You're not doing it because you want to, right? If you don't watch these movies, you don't watch these shows, you don't get why something's happening later on. So yeah, that's kind of been my hot take recently. I've joined the other people in the community that are just not with it anymore.
Let me bring this up to you then. Do you feel that several years ago, 2020, affected Hollywood in general? And do you kind of give Marvel the benefit of the doubt of this kind of like slump per se? Because who knows, we won't know, we don't work there, but the slump that led them to cramming all this in and pushing stuff, kind of rushing it, as opposed to expanding it out.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Like 2020 and the pandemic really affected a lot of what was going down in Hollywood in general, right? Because, obviously, like when all that went down, a lot of movies got delayed. So we switched more to, like streaming services and shows, right? So, for sure, that affected it big time. I really feel like because everybody was at home, everybody wanted something to watch. Everybody wanted something new to watch because, what were we supposed to do? We were on quarantine, right? But, I don't know. I feel like to a certain extent, like, yeah, I can give them the benefit of the doubt that, maybe I can give them the excuse on some shows. But we're a ways out now from that sector and portion of time frame. Yes, exactly. And I don't know if I can give them the pass anymore, because when it comes down to it, right, like Shang-Chi was great. Shang-Chi was a great origin story that we haven't seen in a while from Marvel, because everything's always been, a succession story, right? Spider-Man No Way Home, I don't have to say anything. Everybody knows that it's one of the better movies we've gotten recently. And even like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. It was a great movie, great tribute to Chadwick Boseman, right? Wonderful time. But I don't know. I don't think I can give that pass anymore. Back then, I did. I understood that the whole content thing was just, you were trying to push it out the most so you could be getting the people to come over to your streaming service and let them experience these new stories. But I don't know. I remember reading the stat where it was like between 2008 and like 2019, when the Infinity Saga, it was like a total of like 22 projects, something like that, over a 10-year period.
Yes.
In the last year and a half or 2 years, it's been 17 projects. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's kind of really insane if you think about it. 17 projects in almost a year and a half. That right there just really proves that the quality's, not really paid attention to anymore. So, I don't know. I would give them the pass earlier, but I don't think I can give them the pass anymore. I can't.
I'm going to defend myself, but then also agree with you in the sense of the reason why I think they kind of got the slump is, to any of the audience who doesn't know, they previously Disney had a former CEO in Bob Chapek,
Yeah.
and he's the type of person who wanted content over quality, and that's what I believe began all this stuff as you just addressed thus far. And now he's been let go, and Bob Iger, former CEO, now reinstated, he has stated online of quality over content.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of like, okay, I see your point in that sense, and we've discussed this off camera on another days. I feel like Marvel, and I'll bring up another studio in a second, is a sports analogy.
Yeah.
That Marvel is not particular sports fans in general, but the New England Patriots at the time,
Yeah.
when they had Mr. TB12 Tom Brady,
Yep.
who was the glory years and always there since he left. They've had that slump, and they're trying to rebuild, but it's taking them time, and they're not there yet. So to bring up the other studio per se or a company, DC Comics.
Yeah.
That one for me, I felt as more or less had the sense of it being that they were perfect at the time of when Michael Keaton was Batman.
Yeah.
Earlier Superman, Christopher Reeves. Then they had their Batman phase.
Yeah.
Val Kilmer, George Clooney. Then it was a reboot again of Christopher Nolan's Batman, but it was something separate, but still Batman. Now Zack Snyder, then James Gunn. So do you kind of feel DC's still learning, even though you could Google on the internet that DC has just a vast majority, and this movie studio Warner Brothers just needs to slow their roll down, kind of look what Marvel's doing, but just expand it of the storytelling.
Yeah, no, I think that Warner Brothers. See, so back then, when this whole, the whole DCEU, whatever they wanted to call it, when it started in 2013, with Man of Steel, they started off on the right foot. It was a decent enough movie to start off the universe, but. To what you were saying, yeah, absolutely. Warner Brothers should have slowed their roll. Right now, they were so focused on trying to catch up to Marvel. But at around the time, when they really wanted to catch up to Marvel and make all these movies and compete, Marvel was already 6-7 years in. It's how are you gonna just erase all that time and just expect to bring out a couple movies and we're right on par with them? No. You have to craft a story. You have to craft a universe. You have to craft all these characters that come in to help flesh the story out. And that ended up being their downfall, because a lot of these the old regime that was at Warner Brothers before they got bought out by Warner Brothers Discovery now, they didn't really care. They just cared about the profit. They cared about they were just money hungry. That's all they wanted to do. They wanted to pump out these movies. I remember a time where every single like DC movie that was coming out was like projecting $1 billion, and I'm like, really? Like, you expect it to be like that right away? Like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Obviously, when you have your titular characters, like Superman, Batman, like Wonder Woman, Flash, all them. Yeah, you expect big things, but like, calm down a little bit, right? And I think that's what really bit them that's what really bit them in the ass. I mean, just a lot of these people, they in the old regime, they just didn't have the patience to craft out a full plan. And obviously, we saw what happened, right? It didn't work out. The audience reactions weren't good. We ended up finding out later that, they had an immense problem with studio interference, right? To anybody that, watched, I don't know, it's your opinion, but, the theatrical version of Batman vs. Superman is hot garbage. It's horrible. It's a very bad film. But, add 30 minutes and it is a world difference, It's not by means perfect by any means, but it's way, way better. Same goes with, Suicide Squad. Same goes with Wonder Woman. Same goes with Aquaman. All of these movies, even though you could say Wonder Woman and Aquaman were objectively better, they still had these little parts in there that were studio interfered and it didn't work out. So, I feel like studio interference. I feel like lack of trust in their directors and no clear plan and just trying to rush is what really, really held them down. From the earlier years where Christopher Nolan, like no matter what your opinion is on those movies, like you can't lie that they were a critical success, right? So I just think now obviously, right, also with James Gunn. I'm very hopeful for him. I really like his plan so far. I really like what's going on in this new phase. Hopefully it works out. But yeah, the whole DC and Marvel thing competing back and forth. I'm just gonna say, man, recently, I don't know, DC's been kind of pulling some W's. I don't know. I'm not gonna talk about Black Adam. That's different else. But I mean, I'm just saying, quality over quantity. Look what they did with the Batman.
Right.
The Batman was literally regarded as one of the best movies last year.
Yeah.
It's literally almost a masterpiece. That's what happens when you have a director and you let him, explain his vision in just a craft of his movie. So
let me go off something you mentioned of directors. When directors are directing these comic book films, and we'll jump back into Marvel, do you feel like it should be a half and half? Because previous Marvel films, and I'll bring up several, for example, like the recent Doctor Strange sequel, Iron Man 3, Thor 4, all of those were said to be just the director's films, not a Marvel film. Do you feel like when these directors, and for the future, should kind of like adjust to following the studio, and the studio kind of like split it in half, like kind of an equal thing? You and I are going to agree on today's topic or disagree, but we 50-50 basically.
Yeah. And, for me personally, I've always had the mindset that you need to let the director have and fulfill his own vision. Because, see, here's the thing. A lot of these, let's be real, a lot of these studio execs, they don't know how to direct a movie. They don't know, a lot of the tonal elements that happens in a movie, right? That's what the director's for. That's why you hired them. You trust them enough to hire them. Therefore, why are you going to stick your nose because you don't like something, but, his or her track record has success? For example, look at the Russo brothers, right? Like the Russo brothers have had a history of success, within the Marvel universe. And now with other directors too, that have been brought to DC, like James Wan. James Wan was a critical, horror director that had a track record of nothing but great movies. You bring him in, you let his artistic style flow through Aquaman. It was a hit, made $1 billion. But now, to go back to the question though, I don't think there's a problem with having a 50-50 flow of, hey, like the studio is saying, this is what we want, this is what our vision for the movie is, this is how we want it to connect to the grander scheme of things. But I also feel like it's also the responsibility of the studio to understand, like, hey, we hired this director, right? We wanted him or her for a reason. Go out there and help us, create our vision, but in your style, right? Like you mentioned earlier, like with Doctor Strange. Everybody loves Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi, like, when you're watching a Sam Raimi movie, right? The camera movements, the style of music, the little editing clips, you're watching a movie. And I like that about Doctor Strange, but I feel like there has to be a good compromise, and with the director, with I guess to sum up my point, with the director's choices, I feel like there should be equal kinds of understanding from the studio and the director to the studio as well. Also, I mean, I'm just saying as well, and this has been a big problem within a lot of comic book movies. These movies have been getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and I think we can agree that most of the shorter movies that have come out recently have not been that good. They have not been that good objectively. So, if you're going to be cutting down a director's time to tell his story or her story, don't be surprised when you get like these lackluster movies, So yeah, I do think there should be a 50-50, but I think that, you maybe should have a slight, leniency to allow a little more from the director, the person you trusted to hire, right?
Right.
Yeah.
One last thing, and we're gonna just take a quick little break, guys, so don't worry, there's more to discuss. What is your opinion, and I've heard this term in the ether, of superhero fatigue? For me, since you've known me, I don't feel like I have it. Don't get me wrong. I'll say a movie is not terrible, but it's not enjoyable for the least. But for just the superhero genre in general, that people are getting fatigued. What do you think or feel about when you hear that phrase?
You know what? So with the whole superhero fatigue thing, I understand it because, like I said earlier, that video that I mentioned, where it kind of feels like a chore. It kind of feels like a homework assignment to watch a lot of these movies now. I feel like Hollywood kind of struck a gold mine back in like 2008 when they released Iron Man, when they started all these movies, and then obviously with Christopher Nolan's Batman, right? They struck a gold mine. They finally understood that, hey, we can actually make these movies good now with the technology that we have, and we can bring these characters to life. So back then I feel like it was more like, okay, let's make the best movie possible. Now, I kind of agree with you that I don't think I have superhero fatigue either, because we're just a bunch of comic book nerds. We want as much as possible, right? But I can understand that people have that mindset, because it feels like every year it feels like Marvel's coming out with like 6 different projects that are spread out within the year, like one every 2 to 3 months. And when you get that lack of quality that Marvel's been having, and I'm not just going to call it Marvel as well. I mean, let's be real, the DCEU failed for a reason, right? Even with DC stuff as well, like it gets tiring. It gets tiring to be like, oh, here comes another show. Let's see if I like it or not. Instead of like, oh wow, like I'm excited to watch this. Let's see how it happens. Like that little switch of pace has really kind of turned a lot of people off from the whole superhero genre. And that's why my biggest point is, like, for example, we had the Oscars a couple weeks ago, right? A lot of movies that were awarded, they took their time. Like, for example, one of my favorite movies from last year, I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once. That movie is utterly beautifully written. It is a fantastic film. Is it a little bit different? Did it make, as much money as, these blockbuster superhero movies? No, they didn't. But who's winning the awards? I'm just saying, and another one too, for example, like The Whale. Like, oh my God, The Whale is such a, like a heartfelt, like such a depressing story, but it's so well done. Brendan Fraser plays the character stunningly, like unbelievable. But those kinds of movies that are coming out, right? They're coming out periodically. They're coming out with time. They're coming out unexpectedly sometimes, right? I feel like the superhero fatigue has really, hurt the whole industry in general, because that kind of unexpected, like, oh wow, like we're getting, let's say in a couple years, like we're getting Secret Wars. We're getting the Kang universe. We're getting the Kang multiverse war. All that's kind of already expected. And it's like, oh, well, we kind of have to get there. Let's see how many bad projects I have to go to. But instead, I feel like, and we've talked about this before, right? Like, look at A24. A24 is a fantastic movie company that has literally just made nothing but bangers recently, right? From it started with Hereditary, which this is another topic that I won't get into. That's a whole nother conversation. But Hereditary, Midsummer, recently when they came out, with The Whale, and even like some psychological horror movies as well they've come out with, for example, like X and Pearl. I don't know if you've seen those movies, but they're unexpected quality movies that have come out with the due time. So, me personally, I don't think I have it, but I think super fatigue is a real thing, and I think it's hurting the industry really, really bad.
Yeah, I see your point, and I just kind of feel that people just need to be patient for the most part, and I want just to see. I have faith. I'm not gonna. They have my money. They have my checking and banking account.
They've stolen my money too, man. They've stolen my money too.
Since 2008, from what I can remember. But we're going to hold this conversation for a second. I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back, guys. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the second half of this movie talk conversation with a friend. And Kevin has just been grilling me with. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I have. I have been grilling.
No. I see it understandable because for me, I feel like since I've loved movies and what I've seen, what movies take. And to those who don't know, animated movies take several years to make.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the way movies are set up, you have a script, you have an idea, you have a script, then you have a budget, pre-production, post-production.
Yep.
And then the post-production is doing all the visual effects. And going back into superhero conversation, at the time that we've meeting now and the past few days is Marvel Studios has been in the news, and her name is Victoria Alonso, who was the assistant or associate for Marvel Studios.
She was actually the president, believe it or not.
Vice president. Vice president
Yeah.
And head of visual effects.
Yeah.
And just real quick, just to get your thoughts, a lot of people who work for Marvel have said that stuff is being rushed and grueling and things like that.
Yeah.
And just last week, or the week of March 17th, the weekend before that, is she stepped down. They haven't announced why or what, and there's just been a little bit of changes, and I'll go into the question, but more of the less of going back to Bob Iger's saying quality over quantity, and just getting your thoughts of Marvel Studios is making that change, kind of like the sports reference of they're rebuilding in a way, and how do you kind of feel about what they're kind of doing as of late?
Look for whatever the reason may be that she left, one thing is for sure that a lot of the people that have come out and have publicly said like, hey, like, she is a big reason why, a lot of these movies have just not looked right. The CGI has been off. She's been grilling us day in, day out. I even read a quote saying along the lines of, like, if you went on her bad side, like, you wouldn't get work ever. So
I've heard that.
So if that statement is true, that if you were to get on her bad side, and she was supposedly that toxic as it was, how many people were on her bad side? Because those movies did not look good at all recently. I think most people recently can agree that a lot of Marvel movies have had some very, very suspect CGI. Okay. Unfortunately, nowadays that is just how movies are made. A lot of CGI, especially superhero movie films. So I'm hoping that from now on, they kind of realize like, all right, if all these, allegations and if all these comments are true about Victoria Alonso, I hope Kevin Feige can realize, hey, maybe let's not go down that route again. Maybe I should kind of put my hat back on, maybe just a little more. Let's step into the room a little more, make sure everybody's happy. Because at the end of the day, right, like as long as your VFX workers are happy, because nowadays those people are the most important ones out there. If they're happy, then the movie will end up getting better production. So I obviously we'd unless it's a very, very extreme situation, right? We don't really like to see that people got fired or left, but who knows? Who knows? Maybe this is the start of a new, trend for Marvel movies to have a better VFX experience.
Before the next topic, as of recently too, that Marvel Studios has decided to push Phase 5 films.
Thank God. Thank God.
Do you, obviously, just by that response, do you see it in the way of it being a good thing and sticking to just taking their time, or still doing what they do because they're going to make the money no matter what? Unfortunately, even though Ant-Man didn't make as much money in box office, but to the casual moviegoer, that really is not in their eyesight. They're just going to go see a movie and then call it a day. Do you kind of see these changes as of late being a good thing? And do you think that things look bright, or you still have some doubts or things that should be changed?
This is one of the brighter spots recently. I have the same exact opinion about both movies and gaming, right? When companies push back movies, when companies push back games because they want to fine tune the specs a little more, they want to make sure it comes out right. They want to make sure that the game looks great. I always think that's a great move. Obviously, as a gamer, as a movie lover, everybody, we want to have it right away. We want to have a great game right away. But, and recently, that's kind of been one of the bigger problems when it comes to movies and gaming. I mean, you don't even have to go that far back. I mean, one of the most catastrophic launches of all time for a video game was Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk was one of the most I'm losing the term here really quick. Hyped up games in the last almost decade, right? Everybody wanted to play Cyberpunk. Everybody was so excited for Cyberpunk because of all the great gameplay that was shown at E3 and the trailers and all that. But these guys were rushed in the video game industry. It's called crunching. Same thing I assume for the movie industry. But these guys were getting crunched. The teams were getting crunched. They put out the product and it had one of the worst launches in history, and therefore the game died. Now it's a little bit better because they've pushed up the updates. But why couldn't they wait a little bit more to push out the updates, right? Whether it be greed, which we all know it is, whether it be whatever reason, same opinion that I have goes to these movies, right? I am 1000% okay with delaying all these movies a couple years. It took us 10 years to get to Infinity War. And don't get me wrong, right? Infinity War is one of the more classic stories that we have in Marvel. But I think we can all agree that Secret Wars is 10 times bigger. You mean to tell me that we're going to get to Secret Wars in 6 years, apparently, from the start of Phase 4? How, in any possible way, does that make sense?
I think 2024, but as of right now, it doesn't. And as of right now, going back to what I stated, they're pushing stuff, so it might end up being 10 years.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Look, as much as I want to see the amazing story that is Secret Wars, that is the King Multiversal War right before, as fast as possible, but I'm not gonna be happy if I see it and it's horrible. It's gonna, I'm gonna feel like I got cheated out of, something that could have been amazing, right? I mean, look what happened with Justice League, right? Justice League should have been DC's big bang, DC's big entrance, that this was their go-to way to get back into the game. And we all know how that turned out.
Yeah.
Do we really want that for Secret Wars? Because think about this. No matter what position you're in, no matter what happens, from now on until the end of the MCU, the biggest movies, the biggest thrillers, whatever, you will always be, or at least a story of this magnitude, I should say it that way, you will always be compared to Infinity War and Endgame. And those two are arguably some of the best movies that came out of Infinity Saga. I know you can make all the sayings you want, that you shouldn't be judging it because it'll be different movies, but it doesn't matter. It's just human nature. We will always be judging them compared to those. So that's why, I think that when they announced this at Comic-Con, when, oh yeah, Secret Wars coming out in 2026, I'm like, really? Really? You're going to tell all these stories to get all these characters in 4 years? Mind you, we all know that a movie does not film in, a couple months. It takes years to film. So you're going to tell me you're going to have all those stories ready by 2020, by what, next year technically?
Yeah, 2020. Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So to answer your question plainly, I love it. I'm very happy. Push Secret Wars, push Kang Multiverse of War back to 2028, 2029. I mean, God, if we have to start 2030 with a banger, fine with me, but just do it right.
Yeah.
Do it right, do it solid, let the story flesh out in a great and positive way. Look, man, I'm trying to see Tom Holland as in the black suit as soon as possible, like everybody else. But I want to feel like it's earned. I want to feel like we got there in the right way. So yeah, both gaming and movie wise, I've never thought delays are bad. If anything, I wish more companies had the willpower to say, all right, we're gonna bite a little bit of a bullet, but let's do some delays.
Yeah. To go off of a thing you mentioned, studio, a person like Kevin Feige, kind of to put you on the spot and giving you his hat. You're Kevin Feige.
The Kevin Feige hat is an extreme honor, honestly. I'm not gonna lie.
How would you have redone, and this might be an easy, simple question, but how would you have redone Phase 4?
So here's always been my take on Phase 4. I don't think that the direction of Phase 4 was necessarily wrong. Because in Phase 4, what were the common topics of Phase 4? Grief, loss, having to deal with the aftermath of what happened in Endgame, having to deal with what happened after the blip, right? I don't think that the direction was wrong. I just think the way that it was done was wrong, right? On a surface level, obviously the two things that I've said, spread out the projects more, give them more time, flesh them out, create a bigger story. Don't pump them out just like that. Another big gripe that I've had recently, is these movies are getting shorter and shorter, and I just think that's just harming the movie even more. I don't understand. Well, I mean, obviously I understand why, profit, right? But these movies, they need a little bit longer. I mean, if you look at the common trend, these movies that are getting shorter, their stories aren't fleshed out. They feel rushed. They feel like they're missing something. They feel like they're missing either something tonally or they're missing something plot-wise, whatever it may be. So, space out the projects, delay them more, make the movies longer. Are you really going to complain to watching 30 minutes more of a Marvel movie? Let's be real, right? Come on. But I guess internally, I feel like WandaVision was a great start. I feel like I wouldn't really mess with WandaVision. Loki was another amazing show that came out that, really kind of was the very first trickle, the very first hint of what's to come of Kang. I thought that was fine. But then, we get a little bit more into Captain America and the Winter Soldier. The whole thing of, passing on, who's going to be the new Captain America now? Bucky and Sam, they're kind of, Sam doesn't really feel like he's worth it. Bucky's trying to, by the way, Bucky should have gotten the shield, just saying. But Bucky trying to help Sam out. I don't really think that show did a lot in Phase 4. I really didn't see the point. I mean, the payoff was that Sam kind of feels more like Captain America now. But, other than that, I kind of felt like the story was lacking. And then obviously you go into some other shows, for example, like Moon Knight. Moon Knight was a great introductory, great origin. The ending was a little lacking in my opinion. That was obviously one of the characters that they introduced. They introduced Miss Marvel, coming of age story. It's not for everybody's cup of tea. That's fine. Then they, introduced She-Hulk, then they introduced, for example, Shang-Chi, which is going to be a very, important character now. thought they did Shang-Chi great. I have no problem with Shang-Chi. No Way Home, like I mentioned, one of the greatest nights in a comic book movie nerd's life. I think some of those projects were played out nice. The consistent theme was, how are these characters going to now advance in their lives with the losses? And now losses, for example, Peter just lost Aunt May. Now.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Sorry if you haven't watched it. But now we're gonna get Demon Time Spider-Man. This, as I remember reading a tweet one time where it was all like, Spider-Man character's so happy that Peter's now in the worst part of his life or something like that. But it's true though. These are the stories that end up becoming amazing for Spider-Man, right? We have unfortunately, obviously what happened with Chadwick Boseman. But now we have a good movie. We have a new Black Panther. We had a great telling to continue on the story of Wakanda. Now we had a little dive into the multiverse, right? With Doctor Strange, and the whole thing about street level heroes like Shang-Chi, like Spider-Man, and then you got kind of like the cosmic stuff, and you got the multiversal stuff like Doctor Strange. You have some stuff with Loki as well. I like the direction. I just think that they needed to flesh out the stories a little bit more, in my opinion. So I think there should be some projects that should have been removed from this. I really don't think it was the time to introduce certain characters into this Phase 4. I think they could have waited just a little bit. I feel like, because for the way I felt was, the consistent theme was grief, but it was like one show was about grief, one show was about acceptance, one show was about loss. And then out of nowhere, you have a brand new character that is feeling nothing but amazing, trying to revive us, right? But it feels kind of tonally inconsistent, right? So I think that there should have been some characters that should have been waited later. But, I guess just the main point is just I really feel like a lot of these stories could have been fleshed out way, way better. So delays, make the movies longer. Let's have a tonally consistent phase. Let's keep up with exactly what we're trying to do, because it felt like it was all over the place. I think that's how I would personally run the show. But I mean, I'm not getting paid to do that, so obviously I'm just completely wrong. It's just my subjective opinion.
Yeah. So in the end, I would say the exact same thing. All of this stuff takes time, whether it be film or television. There's so many people behind the scenes, as you all have seen on previous stuff I've done on my episodes. A lot of things go into work of creating all the stuff that we enjoy. For anybody that's watching today's episode, this might not be your cup of tea. There's also stuff that involves sci-fi, horror, comedy, action films, animated films, just the whole genre. I can have another conversation with Kevin in another episode, and we can talk about Disney films. Just the list goes on, and that's kind of just of how I see just films overall. But comic books in general it's at a down point right now. I have faith.
It's okay. James Gunn's gonna make everything right again. He's gonna make everything right again.
I have faith in it, and I see the future is like they've gained a few pounds like me. I feel I just gotta get back on the treadmill.
Come on, man. Come on.
I gotta get back on the treadmill, lose that weight, and be healthy again. They gotta just, like Rocky, just get back up and fight. Just keep going. And I want all movies to succeed.
Absolutely.
Whether I like them or not.
Who wants to see a bad movie? Let's be real, right?
And then they're out there, and I'm not gonna be like, it's terrible, don't go see it. You might like it, or you might all like it as well. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So before we end today's episode, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Okay.
Nothing, no company whatsoever. Your Mount Rushmore of comic book films.
Oh man, my Mount Rushmore. Okay.
I won't hold you to it the next time we see each other off camera.
Okay.
Because mine might obviously be different. This is the top of my head.
Yeah, no, for sure. So my Mount Rushmore. Wow, that's a little rough. Okay, so first one right away, the Batman. Obviously, I mean,
Michael Keaton?
No, Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson. Okay. Okay.
I mean, that is one of the better comic book movies to come out within the last decade. Just the cinematography, the plot, the acting, just the tone, the consistency of the whole entire movie. It's beautiful. Just I loved it so much. I can't even count how many times I've seen it. For sure, first one, the Batman. Second one, this one I think kind of has a more of a special place in my heart. My favorite superhero of all time is Superman. So for me, Man of Steel hits really close to home. It might not be the most perfect movie. Obviously, I can 100% accept that. But for me, whenever I see that movie, when I first saw that movie when I was younger, just like it hit me hard. It's such a movie that I hold close to my heart. I love it. I love Zod. I know the whole ending scene might be very controversial, but whatever. No matter what, I thought Henry Cavill was absolutely wasted as Superman. He is literally born to play Superman, and stuff went down, whatever. But yeah, so for sure, Man of Steel holds a special place in my heart. So that'd be my second movie. My third movie for sure, just because just seeing it on the big screen, just like I said, it was one of the better days to be a comic book nerd. No Way Home, Spider-Man: No Way Home. I mean, to see the beginning part of our childhood with Tobey Maguire come back. To see Andrew Garfield, someone that is criminally underrated as a Spider-Man. What they did to him story-wise, it wasn't his fault. It was the writing. Let's be real. He was a fantastic Spider-Man. To see him come back, help with our boy right now, Tom Holland, just that movie is just something that I can't believe we have, but they did it. So yeah, so Spider-Man for sure, and then obviously, I think if I were to put it up there, one of my favorite projects has to be, I don't know if I can do a wombo combo, but go
ahead.
Infinity War and Endgame, man, like it feels like one of those things where it was like just the culmination of all these years, of all these movies, of all this world building finally gets to a head, and we get one of the most devastating endings of all time in Infinity War. You walked out of Infinity War and you felt lost. You felt like you lost as well. You're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that's how they ended the movie. But obviously Endgame was the year after. But, and then just seeing everybody come back and the ending scene and, seeing everybody deal with the loss and those 5 years of just nothing. Those events, seeing Cap pick up the hammer. Come on, dude. Like, that's one of the, just like, oh my God, I can literally hear like my theater screaming in my mind right now. I think those four are probably my Mount Rushmore, honestly.
I will agree with you and change one of them for me. If you would have told my 10-year-old self that you would have seen 3 Spider-Mans in one movie and have 2 films like Avengers, Endgame, and Infinity War, I wouldn't have believed you. So I would agree with you on those. I would just change your Superman for The Dark Knight.
Fair.
The only reason being,
Dark Knight's a stunning movie.
For just the cinematography and just the story and just having 2 characters that have been around for more than 80 years in the Batman and Joker, and just Heath Ledger, if to all those who don't like it as of now, or liked it back then and still do, I just felt like that's just one of those that is entertaining for a comic book film.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, The Dark Knight is one of the most legendary movies. Like I said, even if you might not like the others, but you can't undervalue the performance that Heath Ledger did in that movie.
Yeah.
Stunning. If I may make an honorable mention really quick.
Go ahead.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of the best projects in the last decade.
Yes.
Honestly, it's like on par with the Batman for me, if not maybe slightly better. That movie is almost perfection. It's so unbelievably good. Actually, no, it is perfection. Let's be real. It is so good.
Yeah.
I think because of the fact that it's like a Sony movie, sometimes it doesn't really get talked about a lot. But I really, really think that it really deserves all the praise it got. Honestly, it's such an amazing movie. So that's my little honorable mention, if anything.
No, I agree with you on that. And that one is one of those that I would put on the corner side, and then
Yeah.
especially the sequel, which the animation
Looks amazing.
once again, before
Yeah.
we end it, just that animation took time. It got delayed from the pandemic,
Yeah, it did.
and then now to the summer. And I believe it got pushed. It's gonna come out in the fall instead of the summer because the animation.
Yeah.
It's a certain type of animation that's gonna just be like that. But I could have this as a 24-hour conversation with you.
Oh, I know. There's way too much to talk about.
This will not be the last, certainly
Yes.
not the least, that we'll meet again.
Yes, sir.
And I want to have other people, friends, talking about movie conversation. Like I said, I've met Kevin. He is a movie fanatic like myself. I know he has other movie topics he
Yeah.
would love to talk about.
Yep.
And you all comment on Kevin's stance of the Marvel. Do you agree with him? Disagree? Movies are subjective.
Please fight me. Fight me. I dare you.
And by all means, and like I said, this was a fantastic thing. I am glad to have done this with you like this.
Thanks for inviting me, man. I loved it. Loved it.
Like I said, this has been episode number 8 of the AMS podcast, discussing films, past, present, and future. I am Adrian Michael Soto. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.